coat on, and I heard it's going to get down to 20 degrees tonight, so be sure that you close the storm windows and get your blankets out when you get home. Well, I wanted to have a chance tonight to talk about the developments that are underway right now this year and things that we're starting to plan for next year, because the budget cycle for next year starts next week. So even though we're only in the third month of the school year, we have to start planning for next year. So I thought a good thing for us to do tonight would be it would be a great opportunity for me to hear from you about large-scale issues that we should try to plan for next year. Because if we start discussing that now, it'll be in time for the budget conversations. And so getting your advice on programmatic things would be a good idea. And I can then include that conversation in the budget process. But first, to mention a few things that are going on right now. So many of you have heard that we have a considerable number of new inclusive schools. These are schools where children with disabilities go to school in class with their non-disabled peers. So in general, in the world of special education now, there are two general kinds of placements. There are what are called substantially separate placements. We call them highly specialized strands here. And then there are inclusive placements. And there are two different kinds of inclusive placements. There's full inclusion and partial inclusion. Full inclusion is when your child is in general education classes for 80% of the day or more. So between 80 and 100% of the day, they're in general education classes. And then for the range between 60 and 80% of the day, we would call that partial inclusion. So a student who's in partial inclusion is enrolled in general education classes, but for a couple of periods a day may be getting assistance in a learning center or a support center outside of the classroom. And then in substantially separate classes, students are spending more than 60% of their time in a special education class. So you probably have a sense about where your child is. But I wanted to say a few things about inclusive settings tonight. There's some pretty good evidence that lots of kids with disabilities do better when they're being educated with their non-disabled peers. So when they're in general education classes. Now that's true for lots of kids. Not all students. So I want to be careful and be clear with you that our school district offers full inclusion placements, partial inclusion placements, and substantially separate placements. And your son or daughter's evaluation team, with you there and you participating, that's the group that makes a decision about the best setting for your child. You are critical, you are the critical player in that process, because at the end of the day, when an educational plan is written, it is offered to you, and you have the right and the responsibility to accept or reject that plan. So in the end, even after you've been part of the process, in the end, you're the one who says yes or no to the plan. Now, some people firmly believe that their children should be in inclusive settings. And some people firmly believe that their children should be in highly specialized settings. What you believe about your children, what you hope for your children, what you want for your children is the most important thing. our job as educators is to try to help you understand your child educationally and to advise you around that decision. But it's your decision to make. I want to encourage more of you to think about inclusive settings. We're in the process, we've made a really serious commitment to more inclusion in the Boston Public Schools. And I want to encourage you to express interest in that and look into it. Yeah.
John, where's the information about these inclusive programs? Because the SpedPac website is set up waiting to have a page there on inclusive programs and specialized, and there's no information. You search the BPS website for the word inclusion, you get maybe 4 hits. You do the What Are My Schools, which is, I'm now trying to figure out where my daughter who's in 5th grade is going to go for 6th grade. You do this special Where Are My Schools program, and if you're in the East Zone, you get one school that says integrated regular ed special ed. All the other schools are regular ed. This pamphlet, which is supposed to help you get through preview time for middle schools, has no information about special ed in it. 0. Except it urges you to ask schools if they have special ed. Are there special education services? So where is this information that we need now?
Right, so I'll get it to you now, okay? I know that the publications and communications are sorely lacking, and it's been on my list for a year to spend time on that. I just haven't had a lot of time to spend on it. But I'll make the commitment to you right.
And next week you'll be tied up in the budget process.
But with John's help, we can get that information onto your website, and I mean it's all written. I need to get it up.
But there's lots of reasons. Unified Services, they help me navigate. There are people within there, and I built really good relationships with people. Michael Murphy, who's not there anymore, and Maria Lopes, and they really help me navigate all those waters.
Actually, I called the special ed department 2 days ago and talked to the receptionist about what I was looking for, and she directed me to Michael Murphy's voicemail. He still has a voicemail, but I guess he's not there.
Yeah, he's not there. But there are other people in those positions. They know those schools, and they literally took me to the school. Like I set up appointments and visited every school that
I know that somebody's got to know it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me give you a few names and the phone number. And there is a new group of leaders in the group that I've chosen, so I'm feeling very proud of them. So I'll give you their names. For high school, if anyone has a child going into high school or in high school, the person to call is Paula Donnelly. For middle schools and K-8 schools, the person to call is Nadia Cyprian. That's Cyprien. We have 2 assistant directors for elementary schools because they divide the elementary schools in this district into 2 groups. The first, his name is Seph, S-E-P-H, Bartholomew. And the other right now is Joan Anderson, although we've just selected a new assistant director, and Joan will go back to her position as executive director, but she's serving in the role of assistant director for elementary B right now. There's one phone number to call, 617-635-8599. When you call that number, one of the wonderful women in the front office will put you through to one of those people. They are all assistant directors. They're responsible for groups of schools. I thought, John, I thought we had handed out the list of office, the administrators last time.
We have some paperwork. I might have some things here.
We'll get you on the website, but we'll get it to you through the organization. Those names and phone numbers that I just gave you.
We'll do our best to get them up next week. for anybody and everybody, and
So
add
who
staff.
do we call for ABA? Because my daughter's been without ABA for 4 years. It's been in her IEP since she started at the con.
Seth or me. And maybe see me before you go home so I can make sure you're there.
So my question is, if, let's say you said when you go through your IEP, you figure out what it is that your child needs, if that child's current school doesn't serve those needs, then how do you get your child into another school? Because in my experience, I've had like resistance sometimes with the school when they can't necessarily meet those needs because they don't want to lose the slot, because the slot loses money. So like, how do you?
It doesn't work that way, but
That's what
I think that's a very good reason to call one of those people I just named.
Oh, okay.
So they are in charge of special ed in those various groups of schools, high schools, middle school, K to 8, elementary. If you call them and say that to them, that you just went through a meeting and your child needs services that are not available at the school they're in, but the school is resisting referring the youngster.
Even if you want inclusion, but your school doesn't offer inclusion.
Okay. So let me say something about that. Okay. With the help of your own leadership of this group, we've made a commitment that we are not going to do what's called dumping, which means taking children with disabilities out of substantially separate classes, putting them in general education classes just because it's inclusion. That actually is not inclusion. That's dumping. We have to make sure that the classes that are defined as inclusive classes have the right size population, the number of kids in the class is correct, that the combination of children with disabilities and typically developing kids is the right combination of kids, and that the school has the services that they need to support the success of the kid. So when I say I'm encouraging you to consider inclusion, I'm saying that because I'm afraid up to this point we haven't had much of it to offer, and now we have a lot more to offer that's in development right now, so I want you to consider it. But inclusion is only good if it works. So if your child is going to go to a general education class and be successful, and there are, right now there are 18 schools that have made a commitment to that. 10 of them are actively implementing inclusion right now. And I'll get you that information so you know what it is. And they're at all levels. There are some elementary, there's some middle, and some high. There was a question over here somewhere, and then I'll come over here. Did I miss a question over here? No. Okay.
Are there some separate schools as they go up 7? Because my grandson went from a sub-separate 2 years ago. He went to Orchard Gardens. Then they dropped the program there. He's in the Little Frederick. He's in an inclusion class with 19 kids. He doesn't know how to make friends. You know, he has a hard time making friends, and he's struggling. He hates school. He's supposed to be in a sub-separate classroom.
Okay. Does the IEP call for that? Then you should fill out one of these forms before you leave tonight, and just mention that at the bottom of the form, and we'll follow up. We have to be implementing the IEPs. And so if the individual education plan calls for a substantially separate placement, then we have to provide a substantially separate placement. Now, there are a lot of substantially separate placements, which I don't think really lead to the success of kids. But that's another issue. There are many children right now in Boston, between 4,000 and 5,000 children in Boston, in substantially separate classes. And some of them very much should be, that's the appropriate placement for them. But there are other kids in those classes who should be in inclusive settings. And I know that from my experience before I came here. So you go to other parts of the country, there are nowhere near those proportions of kids who are separated. And so you can tell by just looking at the numbers that something's not quite right there. But there are children who need placements in substantially separate settings, and we will provide them.
But last March, the SPED department took, all right, so was it last March that you got the notification that they needed to leave that class? So they removed strands, so my son was in the Ornberger doing wonderfully, excelling, and then we got the bad news that he's being pulled from the Ornberger, and we were given a number of choices, but one of the choices, I mean, several of them were just completely unacceptable, and one of the choices was the Lila Frey, but the problem was that they wanted to put a striving on the top of the curve L4 into a U4. That's just not appropriate.
That's true.
And so here I go and visit the school, and I say, but wait a second, where are your L4s? Well, we don't have any L4s, we only have U's. So that if you only have U's, and they want to put a couple L's in with lower performing U's, why is that a choice for me? And why am I being forced to leave a successful program and go there?
I mean, those two conversations make me so sad, because we have two parents telling us these stories, and usually when you have one person telling you, they're representative of a larger percent of people that can't make it, or can't, get there, and so these aren't just two parents, there are probably so many parents that are experiencing that. And when you're talking about the inclusion setting, I know lots of parents that want inclusion setting. We don't have the seats in Boston. And if we put IEPs and we put inclusion setting, are they guaranteed to get inclusion? No, they're not.
Well, hold on. Are you a parent?
No, I'm a teacher.
Okay, so the only way we're going to have more inclusive seats is to make more inclusive seats. So what I'm here to talk about tonight is the effort that's going on right now to make more inclusive seats. Now, you could beat me up over the fact that I don't have enough inclusive seats, and I accept that. But there are far more inclusive seats now than there were a year and a half ago before I came here.
Oh,
So,
no, I understand. I just think it's not fair to say to a parent, consider inclusion unless
no, it is
we
fair.
know-
I'll tell you
Well,
why
no,
it's
let me-
fair.
let me
I'll
finish.
tell
I'm
you
just
why
saying,
it's fair.
Unless we know the percent that is increasing by a huge percent.
I'll
That's
tell
I'm
you
just
why
saying
it's fair.
you
Because
don't have to
until
say both
parents
sides.
ask for it, until parents say, I want my child in an inclusive setting, it's going to be hard for me to make the inclusive settings. So I didn't come here
I
tonight.
know schools that asked to be inclusive and your
Who?
department said no.
Who's that?
Conley School. We would
Well,
love to be
the
inclusive.
Conley School has not contacted me about becoming an inclusive school, and 18 other schools have. Do you teach at the Conley?
I do.
Then ask the principal to contact me.
He told me he did.
Well, I don't have him, okay?
Okay.
So, I want to be really clear. I came here tonight to encourage parents to consider inclusion, because I think this district has discouraged inclusion. Just a second. This district has discouraged parents from considering inclusion, and I don't think that's right. But I will not be criticized for the fact that there isn't enough inclusion yet, because that's what I'm here to do.
Well, I think your message is clearer now. You didn't say before if you don't, you have to act, which comes first, the chicken and the egg. So you're saying consider it, but I think now you're saying once you get the demand, I think your message is clearer than before saying consider it, because, you know what I'm saying? Now I hear you saying that you need to have the demand first before it will
Okay,
materialize.
all right.
I just want to say that my daughter goes to the Harvard Middle School, which is inclusion, which has gone back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's really strengthened now, but it's really taking, John has really helped us tremendously. But also parents, it's really something that the parents have to get behind and force, because he's right. Because if the district isn't hearing it and they're pushing against it, we have to push forward. I mean, I go to school committee meetings and I talk about it, and every chance I get, I will talk to whomever's in charge to talk about it. And now our program has the first Best Buddies program in Boston. We have a great life skills program that's happening. We have our autistic strand, where they're really working to pull those kids in and out of some of the inclusion classrooms, because they really don't want to keep them separate unless they have to and unless their parents want them to really try to push for them to go in and out of the inclusion classrooms. And we're also going to work on an inclusive high school, a good inclusive high school, because it won't work if it's just a dumping ground, because I know that my daughter was in one and it was horrendous, and she just sat in the classroom and she got nothing out of it. So it has to work. Everyone has to be on board, but parents have to get behind to really push for it.
Yeah.